I'm Mary Gallagher. I'm the director of the Center for Chinese Studies. I'm also a professor in political science. And the only thing that I've done relevant to media is an article about media and authoritarianism in China, which argues that the media reform in China has actually strengthened the state, not weakened the state. And I will now introduce our main speaker, and I'll introduce Malcolm after Gabriella's finished. So I'm happy to introduce our main speaker, Gabriella Coleman. She's an assistant professor in the Department of Media, Culture, and Communication at New York University. And her paper title is From Digital Direct Action to Leaking, How to Understand the Politics of Anonymous. She is trained as an anthropologist, and she examines the ethics of online collaboration in institutions, as well as the role of the law and digital media in sustaining various forms of political activism. Between 2001 and 2003, she conducted ethnographic research on computer hackers, primarily in San Francisco, the Netherlands, as well as those hackers who work on the largest free software project, Debian. Thank you. I thought it was a Chinese word, Debian. Her first book is Coding Freedom from Aesthetics and the Ethics of Hacking, forthcoming from Princeton University Press, and she's currently working on a new book on anonymous and digital activism. She is the recipient of numerous grants, Woodrow Wilson Foundation, Ford Foundation, National Science Foundation, and the Social Science Research Council. So I'm very happy to welcome her here. Thank you.
Okay, so first, thank you very much for the invitation. It's a really rich set of panels, and I'm excited for the discussion. Also, one of the unusual things about working on Geeks and Hackers is that, in contrast to the subaltern Chris Kelty, who's an anthropologist, has called them the superaltern, where they kind of meticulously read and watch everything you do. They're doing it probably right now as well. And so I always like to contextualize the talk I'm giving. This is a little bit more of an academic audience, although the first half is pretty descriptive, and then the second half works a little bit more into conceptual issues. But I'm just going to dive right in. So as already noted, I'm an anthropologist that works on Geeks and Hackers. So most of my completed work is concentrated on free and open source software. These are geeks and hackers who make things like Linux and Mozilla and believe in information access and kind of question copyrights and patents. So in comparison to open source hackers like Linus Torvalds, let me actually start this presentation correctly. I can't really see okay, wasn't working using the right, okay. So in contrast, yeah, I got that part, thanks. So in contrast to open source developers, this is Linus Torvalds, a very famous open source hacker with his admiring fans. Anonymous is harder to define, exceedingly hard to study, a bit less clean cut, more mysterious, sometimes downright esoteric and clandestine, and far more transgressive, as perhaps this image conveys better than words. And what I like about this image is that on the one hand, Anonymous, like so much of geek and hacker political action, is rooted in a kind of liberal tradition, and yet you can't reduce hacking of any sort to liberalism. And in the case of Anonymous, it's because they kind of embrace a transgressive politics. So although Anonymous is hard to define, what I can say is that it's a name currently called into being by different groups to coordinate a range of sometimes disconnected actions, most recently political protests and interventions. It is, as one anonymous participant has put it, groups within groups. Architecturally, it resembles a rhizome. To put it in mythological terms, Anonymous kind of looks like a hydra who has built a labyrinth, a maze, which has made my life as an anthropologist quite fun, but exceedingly frustrating at times as I work through the maze. Different groups have taken the name to intervene in different arenas. For example, they've been quite famous for protesting the Church of Scientology, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about this. They provided quite a bit of assistance in the Arab Spring, in Tunisia, Egypt, Libya, Algeria. More recently, many Anons have assisted in the Occupy movements that are taking root across the Americas and Europe by providing kind of technical assistance and being kind of a PR arm. And the Guy Fawkes mask, as we saw earlier, which is the sort of most famous icon to come with Anonymous, has also been part of the iconography of the Occupy movement. That's in Korea, that's in Budapest, that's in UK, that's in Germany, and that's in Brazil. Just to give you a little bit of a sense of some of the imagery with Anonymous. So today what I'm going to do is at first just clear up some of the mystery that clings to Anonymous. They're quite good at creating that mystery. And it's going to be quite incomplete, but hopefully give a little bit of a roadmap. They come out of a very kind of offensive and transgressive world, so there'll be some of that transgression in my slides, not too bad. And then the second half, or the last third, I'll get into more conceptual issues. Okay, so I like to start with what I think is one of the more remarkable aspects to Anonymous. And it is the fact that the political and protest movement emerged largely by accident and in the context of what Martha Nussbaum in an edited collection has called the offensive internet. And this volume looks at blasphemy, harassment, trolling, and I'll talk about trolling in a second. Against all odds, a well-formed political will emerged out of a place where the sacred is to defile the sacred. To be more specific, Anonymous's original home was an image board by the name of 4chan, which a professor here at University of Michigan, who was a colleague of mine at NYU, Finn Brunton, has aptly described as, quote, the single most offensive artifact in human history. So I caution, those who decide to go there, I take no responsibility. 4chan is home to 44 topic-based forums where participants, all of them anonymous, comment on discussions and start each thread with an image. Many of the images are esoteric, audacious, creative, humorous, heavily photoshopped, grotesque or pornographic, or grotesquely pornographic. The only thing that is banned on 4chan is a form of porn, which is child porn. So in contrast to so much of the web, which is basically one giant surveillance machine or archive, 4chan is not archived. When people stop posting on a thread, it vanishes. It goes 404. The posts are also thrown up at an incredibly fast rate and volume. And so these rapid-fire conditions, the pervasive anonymity, and the lack of an archive magnify the need for audacious, unusual, gross, or funny content because that helps to ensure a kind of steady stream. And one thing that happens quite a bit on 4chan is trolling. And trolls are kind of commonplace on 4chan. So some of you may be asking, like my student did the other day, what the heck is trolling? Okay, so in essence, trolls seek to offend, sometimes deeply, sometimes humorously, sometimes the humor converges with being offensive, sometimes it doesn't. These roguish acts have a long history on the intranet, and they take many different forms. For instance, some trolling is coordinated by a small group of individuals under associations that bear very trollish names. One of the most famous non-anonymous trolls is, that's troll, a kind of image for a troll face. One of the most famous trolls is Weave, who's currently facing a trial for some of his hacking. And Weave is such a good troll because people don't really know if he's really a racist or a bigot or really a troll. And he's not anonymous. He's been on the cover, the front of the New York Times Magazine, for example. In contrast to celebrity pranksters, hellraisers, trolling on 4chan is best described as crowdsourced, distributed, and anonymous, as large masses of unknown participants contribute to a raid. These raids can also assume multiple forms and formats, from frivolous to aggressive, humiliating, and intimidating. From saving cats, this was a cat that was saved through a trolling raid, to telephone pranking and sending unpaid pizzas to targets' homes, to beheading the visiting anthropologist, that's me, who was visiting some Anons in Ireland, and that was their welcome message, to what's called doxing. That's revealing an individual's name, home address, phone number, and social security number. Often, trolling encompasses all these things, unpaid pizzas, doxing, and humorous elements as well. To summarize, to troll is to provoke, taunt, terrorize, shock, magnify, and at times extend existing stereotypes, to transgress, to play, to trick, and on and on. Although trolling is delivered in many different ways, many trolls will say they do what they do for a 4-letter word called the lulz. Packed within these 4 letters, which is a plural bastardization of laugh out loud, is a complex cultural world of humor, at times coy and playful, at other times really far more sinister and dark. The term, which has wide currency on many different quarters of the internet, not just 4chan, designates the laughter and the pleasures that can bubble up from many different activities, from making fun, cute cat images to the chaos secured from a full-fledged trolling attack. Lulzy humor is hard to distill in a few sentences, but a number of words might help capture its spirit: coy, improper, offensive, cunning, mischievous, insensible, and arcane. Like so much humor, the recognition of something as lulzy also secures the pleasure of in-group belonging. Again, the lulz connected to many different websites on the internet, such as 4chan and Encyclopedia Dramatica, which is an encyclopedia that catalogs troll history and culture, all the while trolling people who visit the encyclopedia. So back to Anonymous. Since at least 2005, perhaps even earlier, Anonymous was a name used by anonymous trolls to engage in very trollish behavior. Truly trollish. But in the winter of 2008, a transformation occurred whereby Anonymous also started to engage in more traditional protest activity. And we have Tom Cruise, the Church of Scientology, and some really interesting videos to thank for this dramatic metamorphosis. Okay, so what happened? Someone leaked this video, which I'm not going to show because I don't have time, but it was a recruitment video internal to the Church of Scientology where Tom Cruise was like excessively praising the Church of Scientology. Someone leaked it. It went viral. The Church of Scientology then threatened websites like Gawker with lawsuits if they didn't take it down. And then Anonymous, again, is like, ooh, perfect trolling opportunity. We're going to troll the heck out of the Church of Scientology. And really, it was quite legendary. The activity that was launched against the church. Many pizzas were sent to churches. They prank called the Dianetics hotline. They sent nude body parts that were faxed to the churches. Now, despite the fact that Anonymous was trolling the church for the lulz, it was done for the lulz, these acts at the time, which I was following, did strike me as similar in spirit to the actions brought forth by the bandits in Europe during the 19th century, examined by cultural historian Hobsbawm in Primitive Rebels. Social bandits were thugs, but thugs carrying the seeds of a faint revolutionary spirit. For when they plundered, they sometimes redistributed goods to the poor or offered protection. Hobsbawm thus defines them, the bandits, as, quote, pre-political figures, a people who have not yet found or only begun to find a specific language in which to express their aspirations about the world. And the pre-political element that I saw was the fact that Anonymous was sort of reacting to censorship. There was like some free speech issues, right? So there was this kind of pre-political texture. Soon after launching the first series of trolling attacks, the course and, quote, the specific language of Anonymous shifted significantly, and Anons settled into more traditional-looking politics. They made connections with an older generation of protesters who protested the Church of Scientology. They explicitly honed in on censorship issues and human rights abuses, rationales that had only existed incipiently in that first wave attacks. They significantly toned down the trolling, and they amped up the more traditional protest activity, doing so, curiously, after the release of 3 videos. And the most famous of these 3 is A Message to Scientology, which is really wonderful. Again, I'm not going to show it, but they declare war on the Church of Scientology. And it's a really wonderful video because, on the one hand, it was done entirely for the lulz. Like, the group of 5 people who did this, they were not seeking to transform the course of Anonymous. They were just having fun. So on the one hand, the video strikes as very kind of serious, but very playful at the very same time. And basically what happened was this video, along with a few others that were more earnest, prompted a very, very lively internal debate as to whether Anonymous should protest the church in earnest or remain very faithful to its lulz-making tactics and mission. One of the editors of the Hello Leaders of Scientology video explained to me that this transformation had to do with the right video at the right time. There were people who didn't think Anonymous or 4chan should take to the streets. But the consensus to actually do it, the street protest, came relatively easy for us after the video. It seemed to be great timing, the right video at the right moment. So on February 10th, 2008, 6,000 Anons hit the streets in cities across North America, Europe, Australia. A couple of people showed up in Brazil. One person showed up in Japan for a worldwide day of action to protest the abuses of the church. And it was here that a distinct political sensibility sprouted that has since been cultivated in some very deliberate ways. And unfortunately, I don't have the time to talk about why it is that this kind of day of protest, I think, led to a more distinct political sensibility, but perhaps we can talk about it afterwards. So this was in the winter of 2008. The name Anonymous was still being used out of 4chan to troll. But Anons in this network were using the name to protest the Church of Scientology, both online and holding street protests every month in cities across North America and Europe. By September in 2010, different groups started to take the name, also to organize different forms of political activity. Anons were protesting copyright abuse. They lent support in Iran's failed Green Revolution, among many other operations. During this period, in other words, Anonymous was becoming what scholars of phenomena like Captain Ludd or Luther Blissett have called an improper name, which is defined by Marco Desires, who's written a great dissertation on Luther Blissett and Captain Ludd, as the adoption, this is a quote, the adoption of the same alias by organized collectives, affinity groups, and scattered individuals. So Captain Ludd was taken by different Luddites in different cities in Europe to lay claim to certain political actions, and the same is the case with Luther Blissett, which was kind of invented by Italian activists in the 90s, but really spread all throughout Europe. But despite the proliferation of Anonymous, despite the fact that it was becoming an improper name, Anonymous was still rather anchored in geek and hacker communities and worlds, not really making news outside of technology news portals, with a few exceptions, right? Such as when they protested the Church of Scientology. That is until December 8th, 9th, and 10th of 2010, when hackers, system administrators, activists, geeks, programmers, and many unknown parties organized an extremely spectacular distributed denial of service attack aimed directly at disabling Visa, MasterCard, and PayPal servers, an operation called Operation Avenge Assange. And this was done because these companies stopped processing donations for WikiLeaks, right? And they did so soon after the activist organization released 220 confidential diplomatic cables, causing a huge political firestorm. Months later, an Anon participant told me that they too had been taken quite by surprise by how many people participated, as there were nearly 7,000 participants who logged into the chat channel where people were organizing the DDoS attack, and over 30,000 people downloaded Low Orbit Ion Cannon, the piece of software whereby you can contribute to a DDoS attack. And for those that may not know, a DDoS attack is basically not a form of hacking. You just make too many requests to a website through various mechanisms, and then it can't handle those, so you can't access the page anymore. And really, this was quite dramatic, this campaign. Here's the manifesto that Anonymous wrote, because in basically 24 hours, one of the largest kind of, I think, examples of digital direct action was successfully, pulled off. For better or for worse, there were some real kind of strengths and real weaknesses to such a populist campaign. Okay, what began as a single campaign in December on a network called Anon Ops, which was the name of the IRC network where activity was being coordinated, proliferated with each passing day. And I thank the academic gods and goddesses that I was on sabbatical last year, because over the subsequent 9 months, the Anon Ops network became home to over 36 political operations. from giving aid to all sorts of the kind of Middle East and African revolutions, to fighting censorship in Malaysia, from hacking NATO to the agrochemical giant Monsanto, Anonymous became some sort of political force to contend with, and it was featured nearly every day in major news outlets. Okay. Now that we have a little bit of a picture in place of Anonymous, where they came from, what they do, I'm going to just move into a few conceptual issues. Discuss who lies behind the mask, what sets them apart, why they might be important. Unfortunately, I can't talk about social organization today, but I've written a little bit about that if you're interested. Okay, so who lies behind the mask? The press loves to claim that Anonymous is teeming with hackers, often hackers on steroids. And it's a bit more complicated than that. It is the case that a small core number of participants in Anonymous are hackers, by which I mean skilled programmers, security researchers, system administrators who identify as such. But the thing about hacking, and that's what I tried to get at with the initial image, is that there's a lot of differences among hackers. And I try to conceptualize this as different genres of hacking. And some, stay within kind of legal traditions, such as free and open source software. They may hack the law, but they stay within the law. And there's more transgressive traditions in hacking as well. In Anonymous, hackers are without a doubt important for two distinct reasons. First of all, they run the infrastructure that Anonymous uses, such as internet relay chat, and a small cohort are behind the hacking operations. And I'm going to get to some of these hacking operations a little bit later. This is only a small subset of operations within Anonymous, but obviously the media loves to report on hacking, so they often get this sort of lion's share of the media attention. But Anonymous is a lot more populous than a lot of hacker sites of action. A lot of kind of hackers, you have to have tremendous amount of technical skills to participate in certain domains, and that isn't the case with Anonymous. So much larger group within Anonymous I would provisionally call, because I don't have a better name, I haven't invented a better word, as geeks. These geek participants hold a number of digital media literacy, such as video editing, design skills, collaborative writing tools, and enough technical know-how to use things like internet relay chat, which are quite easy to use, but somehow a lot of people just don't even really know about it. Alternatively, you can kind of identify geeks by the kind of cultural worlds that they move through, and this is from the New York Times, and probably my favorite representation of what a geek is. It just does a much better job than me rattling off some definition. Other participants may not qualify or identify either as geek or hacker, but through participation in this digital domain, you start to learn some of the cultural codes, such as the lulls or digital literacies, that kind of makes you into a geek. I also want to note that it's, there is a kind of remarkable diversity within Anonymous. There is a little bit of a kind of rainbow nation. You have guys from, the most remote island in Wales with Puerto Ricans, such as the hacker Sabu, who are working together. You have folks from all over Europe. You have people who are part of the 1%, people who are part of the 99%. You have leftists, anarchists, who are working alongside kind of capitalist-loving libertarians, right? So on the one hand, it is constrained. Not everyone is participating in Anonymous, but, geeks and hackers really, you can't distill them into sort of a social class or a type. So there's a kind of remarkable diversity to Anonymous, and it's been fascinating to get glimpses of the people behind the mask over time. Okay. If Anonymous functions as an improper name, and if there's such diversity, is there ideological consistency to their actions? So yes and no. Many Anons appear when censorship shows its face, such as in January 2011 when they went to Tunisia, not because there was a dictator. They went to Tunisia because the dictator was blocking WikiLeaks. It's the same thing in San Francisco, but then, of course, they got involved beyond issues of censorship. And it's the same thing in, for example, Operation BART in San Francisco. They had a very robust operation there. They went there because the BART was going to shut down cellular service, so protesters couldn't organize protests against police brutality. So, of course, Anon's like, ooh, censorship, I'm there. And then, of course, they get involved and start to care about other issues, such as police brutality, right? They also embrace and incarnate, and this is no surprise given their name, anonymity, right? And this has a kind of long life in the liberal tradition. And I would say that anonymity and anonymous functions in two different ways. On the one hand, it functions politically in the sense that they believe that you can't have robust democratic life unless you protect anonymous speech. And what they say about this kind of strikes is very similar to like Supreme Court cases that have ruled in favor of anonymous speech. But anonymity also works ethically in a very, very fascinating way in Anonymous. And it functions as a fascinating alternative to what we, the we being the cultural we, are socialized in desiring and seeking from a very young age: individual fame, glory, recognition, celebrity. Anonymous provides a provocative antithesis to our celebrity-saturated and obsessed world, but it is rather more interesting than just that. Part of the reason that Anonymous looks the way it does, as a hydra, a rhizome, wildflowers blooming with so many operations, is because individuality flourishes within the context of Anonymous. Individuals and small groups with Anon want to take their own path of action, but do so in a way that does not require permission nor ask for personal recognition. In fact, it asks you not to do so. And Anons famously shun those that try to seek recognition. And even myself, I have to be careful in terms of how I present Anonymous, and they sometimes remind me to be a little bit more humble. So this is a very, very robust ethic that exists across the different networks of Anonymous. But the politics of Anonymous cannot be reduced either to their free speech sensibilities nor their commitments to anonymity, however strong these are. Nor is the story of Anonymous, I think, served well by the story of maturity as they started to diversify their political portfolio to engage in a stunning array of interventions. As Anons carried forward with more traditional protest activity, such as street demonstrations, the DDoS campaigns, they did not entirely part way with the lulls. In contrast to the moral narrative implied by Hobsbawm, who I quoted earlier, where bandits can only become political actors if they gave up their fearsome tactics, which in the case of the bandits they never did, Anonymous moved towards political action by integrating, albeit taming, lulzy tactics. The politics of Anonymous are in fact marked by a certain dynamic duality. The distinct political expressions of Anonymous sits and tacks between, sits between illegal and transgressive interventions in human rights activism, predictability and unpredictability, duplicity and earnestness, seriousness and frivolity. To more richly grasp this dynamic, you really do have to get to the lulls, which is where they came out of. And today, many of those who coordinate political interventions under the banner of Anonymous are still inspired by the lulls, even if they cannot lean on it so heavily. Indeed, over the past few years, as a broad range of participants have deployed the name Anonymous, the role of the lulls as a motivator has become weaker and more dilute. Some Anons are uninterested in this tactic and sentiment, while others are simply in it for the lulls. But the lulls did not and perhaps could not vanish entirely. The sense of creative freedom, mischievousness, shock value, and play is intimately connected to the political imagination underlying Anonymous's diverse political actions. Anonymous was born, after all, in the lulls, and in the lulls they still trust. Now, there's many different examples I can give you where they kind of unleash the lulls, one of which has to do with, for example, someone getting naked, slathering Vaseline and pubic hair all over their body, and streaking into a Church of Scientology in New York. And that's like the lulls in action. I'm going to give you a story of one that actually had some really fascinating political consequences to start towards my conclusion. And it's an operation called Operation H.B. Gary. So this op, which was one motivated by the lulls, emerged soon after Anon started to assist in Tunisia and Egypt. And it came in the form of attacking and trolling, I'll continue on. In the form of attacking and trolling the heck out of a security consultant by the name of Aaron Barr, featured there, who worked for a security firm by the name of H.B. Gary. Now, what happened? Aaron Barr supposedly infiltrated Anonymous on the chat rooms, and he went to the Financial Times and say, hey, I've got a list of all the important Anons. I'm going to go to the FBI and I'm going to give the names over. Well, a swift and brutal response was unleashed by a small crew of hackers in Anonymous. His Twitter account was hacked and used to spew the most offensive, racially charged 140-character statements. They made fun of his research as amateur and pointed out how his list of names was completely wrong and potentially damaging to innocent people. His photo was remade into every imaginable and even some unthinkable caricatures. Most importantly, they hacked into the company he worked for, downloaded 70,000 of his emails, deleted untold number of files, and many of the backups in the company, and then on top of it, posted all his emails on Pirate Bay for people to download. And they did this all in 48 hours. So after these events, which, we were all watching, the mood of Anonymous was electrified for all sorts of reasons. First was the sweet irony that a security company could be so easily hacked, doing irreparable damage to their image. It is also curious that some Anons had been expressing concern that the Lulz gas tank had been running low during the Middle East and African actions, and these actions, H.B. Gary served to fill the Lulz tank back to full. One participant describing the Lulz post H.B. Gary to me as being in a state of surplus. But as an extra bonus, it looked like the trolling retaliation might have led to some political good, even if this was not part of the moral calculus. An enormous amount of detail was uncovered in the emails showing that H.B. Gary and H.B. Gary Federal was engaging in what I call digital privateering, acting or wanting to act as outsourced provocateurs, hired thugs for the purpose of disruption and to discredit. In specific, and just one example because there was a number of them, the emails included a PowerPoint presentation outlining how H.B. Gary and a few other companies could help undermine WikiLeaks by submitting fake documents to WikiLeaks that, once revealed as forgeries, would discredit the organization. They also devised plans to undermine the career of various reporters, such as Glenn Greenwald, a reporter for Salon.com, who's a big supporter of WikiLeaks, claiming that he will pick his career over supporting WikiLeaks. So the inner workings of an outsourced and privatized COINTELPRO-like proposal were laid bare for the world to see, and Anonymous watched with glee at the fallout while rolling on the floor, laughing out loud. The hack was thus not only celebrated for restocking the lulls, but it changed the political possibilities within this network. The massive media attention it received, combined with the damning details in the leaked emails, nearly impossible to get through legal channels, such as FOIA, is what likely inspired the small crew of hackers to continue hacking in this style. First, with a breakaway group called LulzSec, which is Lulz Security, and subsequently they returned to Anonymous with Operation Antisec, conducted within the network. Prior to this event, this form of hacking, that is hacking to expose security flaws and access politically sensitive information, had been uncommon to this network, though other modes of hacking, such as web defacing, were commonly deployed. This event, in other words, inaugurated a new, especially transgressive hacking chapter in the AnonOps history, whereby hacking for leaking became one of their central operations, at least for a few months. And it's really interesting to see Anonymous because not simply are they sometimes motivated by the lulls, but they're a little bit spontaneous and impulsive, and then they go ahead and do something, and then once, the political possibilities cement, they continue forward. But it has this very real-time quality to it. So AnonOps, which became so famous in for supporting WikiLeaks in December of 2010, started to undertake similar but distinct work by the spring of 2011. Similarly, these hackers leaked hard-to-access and politically sensitive information, but also distinct because hackers took personal initiative to directly hack corporations, government agencies, and private contractors. So they took on the risk themselves because there was no kind of mediator. All of these characteristics, the ethic of anonymity, the rowdiness that's part of the lulls, and their unpredictability has made Anonymous into a particular type of threat. Anonymous, in fact, provides a perfect example of what Giorgio Agamben has highlighted by drawing on the Tiananmen Square protests of 1989 as one of the more intolerable threats to state power. And now I'm going to quote him. "What the state cannot tolerate in any way is that singularities form a community without affirming an identity that humans co-belong without any representable condition of being. And it's really interesting because Anonymous really brings that into action because they're anonymous, they never show their face. And while obviously not everyone is anonymous, you don't always really know who Anonymous is. And there is something very politically threatening about that. Anonymous steers clear from articulating stable political identities based on nation, class, gender, or ethnicity, even if these obviously play into Anonymous. And these, of course, have dominated many political imaginaries for the past century. Unsurprisingly, the state has entered the fray shortly after the publication of a report by NATO, which had sort of described Anonymous as a threat that must be persecuted. That was a typo in the NATO report that they changed to prosecuted. So shortly after this publication, which was about WikiLeaks, it was about Anonymous, very interesting report, many Anons were arrested. In July alone, 22 alleged Anons in the United States and the United Kingdom were arrested, 14 of them in connection with Operation Avenge Assange. There are now more than 24 participants who might face trials in Spain, Ireland, Italy, the UK, and the United States. So, given the strong crackdown, it's hard to predict where the future of Anonymous lies, and especially how the lulls will reemerge. Unsurprisingly, the string of arrests has dampened its spirits. But to finish, it's worth returning to 4chan, the place where Anonymous got its start. The fact that a robust and rich, even if at times terrifying, politics arose from the depths of one of the seediest places on the internet represents what theorist Ernst Bloch might identify as a politics of hope. Against all odds, a well-formed political will arose from a place where the sacred is to defile the sacred, a politics of tricksterism and transgression. Over the past 3 years, an unknown number have taken the name Anonymous, which once had been fully rooted in a rough and tumble politics of transgression, and enlarged it by fusing it with more traditional formats and sensibilities. The threat of Anonymous may also lie in this very metamorphosis. What was once only about the lulls and rowdy and ecstatic, thus Dionysian in spirit, has become more ordered, more Apollonian, to borrow Nietzsche's formulation of the oppositional creative forces he discerned in Greek tragedy. Within the political expressions of Anonymous, these two sides, the ordered and the disordered, the cool and the hot, the serious and the lulls, now coexist to ensure a fiery storm of political action that will make some inspired to follow suit, others smile, others cry, and leave many wondering what and who lies beneath the mask. So that's it for now. Thank you.